How do I say this presentation to this thing? Do it.
Lisa, are we ready? We ready?
This PC is updating, so but you guys can start. It's just going to take a minute for this thing to get going, but we're recording and all that good stuff.
Okay. Should we wait or proceed?
I just can't start the PowerPoint, but if you guys want to start talking, we'll do it. Are you ready? I just can't do this for a minute. It's update thing.
Oh, was that one of those forced updates?
Apparently, it got turned off, so now it's not going to let me.
Probably.
And now I can open it. Now I can open it.
You can't open it? We're cursed. It's the gremlins in the building. Oh, you haven't heard about our plumbing problems, have you? We had 2 feet of water underneath City Hall. We've been pumping it out for 2 days. Yeah. You can't get back to it?
Computers on.
Everything's still recording,
You can get back to it.
but you don't have to call it every
I can do it for you in a second.
Okay, good.
start.
This will, it'll
I don't care. I just assume not be recorded.
What?
It's like, I would just assume not be recorded. Is she ready?
Yeah.
You did that a couple times, shouldn't you?
Lisa, you good?
Go ahead.
All right. Okay. I'll call this joint meeting to order. If you'll join me, we'll start with a prayer. Dear God, we pray that you will bless and guide us through this meeting. Help us have a productive discussion that will broaden our perspectives. Help us to resolve any disputes gracefully and find principles that we can agree on. Help us generate good plans that are practical, sustainable, and easily implemented. Guide us toward the best way to take action to accomplish our goals. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, if you'll join me with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. All right. Okay. The next item on the agenda is citizen comments. Do we have any citizen comments? All right. With that, we'll move right into the next item on the agenda, which is item 4. And we have Mr. Coker here to present to us about the zoning and comprehensive plan. So I will turn the meeting over to you.
Over there, take my mask off.
Okay.
All right, so what I wanted to do today was to try and introduce some of you who are not familiar with the concept of zoning, to kind of a little foundation. Talk about where the authority for the city to adopt a zoning ordinance comes from. Thank you, sir. And how you can best use it for those of you who are on the Planning and Zoning Commission. And we're also going to talk about, later on in my presentation, the comprehensive plan, how you think we should update the comprehensive plan or start over, then move along into a short review of the comprehensive plan elements that really relate to economic development, more specifically. And then the last thing is to talk about a city center concept, if it makes sense. And I brought a special map that doesn't have any extra colors except for the city limits over there. And what I want to do, if we have time, because it's 6:30 now and it'll be 8 o'clock before we know it. So I want to be able to try and identify, with your help, some logical locations where, if the concept for a city center type of activity makes sense, where that would be located. And so we'll talk about that a little bit later in the process. Are you going to run the slides,
Yes.
Shelley? Lisa?
I got it.
So the state law, the Texas Local Government Code, and for those of you who aren't familiar with that, this is it. It gives us the legislative authority, us being the city, to adopt regulations to divide the city into sub-areas, zoning districts, and the authority comes from chapter. Let me get on the same page as you are now. Chapter 211 of the Local Government Code, and it allows us to regulate the height, number of stories, the size of buildings, and other structures, the percentage of lot that may be occupied. And when it says lot that may be occupied, that is how much land a building can cover. Not the floors necessarily, but how much land on the ground floor it would cover. The size of yards, courts, and other open spaces. So you've got front yard setbacks, side yard setbacks, and rear yard setbacks. And sometimes you have easements. Sometimes you'll have a platted building line, which is not a zoning thing, but it's a platted thing. And we're going to be bringing you some changes to the subdivision regulations and some changes to the zoning regulations over the next few months. And we'll be talking about how we should treat easements and the things in the construction as it relates to easements. Population density and the location and use of buildings, other structures, and land for business, industrial, residential, and other purposes. Industrial, commercial, retail, that kind of stuff. Next slide. the state regulatory authority for zoning requires that your zoning be in conformance with the comprehensive plan. And when I get to the comprehensive plan, we're going to spend just a little bit more time on that and have a little discussion. Then the state law allows us to divide the city into districts. I talked about that, and I put the language up there for you to look at. Let's see. Go to the next slide, would you? Maybe you've gone one more. There. You probably can't read that, but it allows us to decide how big a zoning district is, what the uses are that are allowed in the zoning district. A zoning district must be consistent. So if I say that I've got an R SF 1.5, all of the SF 1.5s in the city have to be the same. The zoning, not the houses, not the lot sizes, but if you think about the zoning ordinance itself, if you go to SF1, it requires a minimum lot size of 1.5 acres, and it also requires a minimum of 300 linear feet of frontage on a public way. And a public way doesn't necessarily mean a street, it could be a public easement. But so you can say 300 feet wide, 200 feet deep, that's what the code calls for. When you do the math right quick, that doesn't come to 1.5 acres. So you end up needing to stretch it this way or stretch it that way. But it allows us to regulate how that is effective. And an interesting component, next slide, is protests. And this is important because it applies both at the Planning and Zoning Commission and at the City Council. I'm not going to, you can read that if you can. I can, but I have it on my computer right here. Essentially, if the property owners of 20% of the land in the notification area, okay, not 20% of the property owners, but the owners of 20% of the land in the notification area are in opposition to a change in zoning, it requires a 3/4 vote of the Planning and Zoning Commission to approve, to make a recommendation for approval, and it requires the same level for the City Council. So when it gets to City Council, let's say that we've got a subdivision or a zoning case that covers Kingsbridge. You draw a line around Kingsbridge that's 200 feet around it, including Kingsbridge. And that's the notification area. And we send ballots to all those property owners and they get to vote. And that percentage of their land that's in the 200 feet counts toward the total square footage. And so you take the total amount of everything inside the notification area with the exception of streets. Street rights of way don't count. Then you calculate the amount of square footage that the opposition has said, and if that comes up to 20% or more, then it requires a 3/4 vote of the Planning and Zoning Commission or the City Council to approve a change in zoning. And just for the simple math, if you have 5 members on the commission, that takes 4 because 75% doesn't divide well into 5, okay? But so you have to round up to the next whole person. And if only 4 people show up to vote, then it takes all of them to say yes. Because if you can't vote on it because you own the adjacent property. I think Ms. Swalge had a case like this a couple of years ago. The fact that you can't vote doesn't get me to reduce the number of 75%, because it's 75% of the appointed or elected officials. And in our case, it's always going to be 4 in order to pass. It's an important it's an important issue. I don't go into it very much tonight, but if somebody doesn't like the decision of the city council, let's say that they thought that they should get approved and the council denies it because of the 20% rule, then the applicant has the opportunity to appeal that decision to, generally it's to district court. It's either district court, state law says the county, thanks. It could be a county court as well, but generally these things go to the district court. They have to do it within 10 days following the decision by the council. So if we had a council meeting last night and there was a zoning case on it that got denied because 20% rule, or denied because it wasn't consistent with the comprehensive plan, then the applicant has the right, not the obligation, but the right to appeal that to a court of law. What that does then is it stays any enforcement action from the city until such time as the litigation is completed. Next slide. In addition to the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council, we have another board called the Board of Adjustment. For the sake of this discussion, it's the Zoning Board of Adjustment. The Board of Adjustment also can hear appeals of all kinds of things, but in this case, it's the Zoning Board of Adjustment. And a person who wants a modification to the requirements of the zoning ordinance can go to the Board of Adjustment and request a variance. It's not a change, it's a variance to rules. I talked about the 300 feet of frontage, which is a requirement for all of our standard zoning districts for residential. They all require 300 feet of frontage. I think it was on 1139, we had a property owner that had 302 feet or something like that, 332 feet, but there were 2 lots there, and each one of the lots was 169 linear feet of frontage, and they had to go to the board in order to plat it, because platting, I mean, I'm not going to talk too much about platting, but in order to be able to plat it, it was already zoned for the SF 1.5, but they didn't have the right frontage to do 2 lots, even though there were 2 lots there. And so in order to get a building permit, they have to plat, and in order for them to plat, they had to ask the Board of Adjustment for a variance to the requirement of the 300 feet for each lot. And the board said, we're going to grant this 169 feet for you and 169 feet for you, but you have to plat it in accordance with the plans that you submitted. Now, the interesting thing about the Board of Adjustment, it does not answer to the council. It doesn't answer to the Planning and Zoning Commission. They are an independent body. They can get guidance from everybody else, but you don't get to appeal their decisions to the council. You have to appeal their decisions to the court of law. Just like if you don't like what the council does, you have to appeal that to a court of law. Next slide. And let's go to next slide. We talked about that. Okay, comprehensive plans. Now, you all got the comprehensive plan for the city as an attachment to the agenda. I hope you had a chance to look at it. But let's talk about this, where we get the authority to do this. Chapter 213 of what? The Texas Local Government Code. 211, zoning. 212 is platting. 213 is comprehensive plans. And while it's a big book, the chapter's not that long. Okay, so the whole idea behind a comprehensive plan is to promote sound development and the public health, safety, and welfare. I mean, it's the same for all the kinds of things that municipalities do for the benefit of the citizens, to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the community. A comprehensive plan can include land use, transportation, public facilities, economic development. I mean, almost anything that you can imagine, and our current one has a lot of those same components. Future land use plan, transportation plan, public facilities plan, open space plan. Those are all things that are related to our comprehensive plan that also have a component that is economic development oriented. Okay, so next slide. Two slides. There you go. The comprehensive plan may be adopted by ordinance. And this is a change about 10 or 15 years ago. It used to be that you could adopt a comprehensive plan by ordinance or by resolution. But when you adopt a plan by ordinance, then it has the enforceability of law. And that's an important issue. Not that I don't think I've ever seen anybody get cited for a violation and have to go to court. But the next slide, please, tells you that you have the authority to do that. And generally, a violation of municipal ordinance has a maximum penalty of $500. But they made an exception for zoning. It can be up to $2,000 for each violation. So if somebody, let's say, were to go out and do a business in their, a commercial business in their residential lot, they could be cited and upon conviction could be fined up to $2,000 per day. That becomes fairly stiff. I don't think that we've done that here, but the point here is that the potential is there for you to regulate people who are not willing to comply with the rules. You also have to have the wherewithal to go to court, because you have to go to court if they decide to fight it. Okay, next slide. So, three basic components for comprehensive plans. Got to be easy to use. If you make it so complex that it is difficult, well, let me state it a different way. If you make it so complex that somebody has to hire Mike Coker to determine what it says, then it's too difficult. Because everybody sitting at the table here should be able to understand what we're talking about by opening it up and reading it. And so the first thing is easy to use, easy to update. And this is one of the issues about your current comprehensive plan. We've updated it probably a half a dozen times since it was adopted, and it's easy to do. It still takes an ordinance. Still planning and zoning gets to review it. City council has to consider it, and if they agree, it gets updated. Ours is like that, and it should provide guidance to the community and those who desire to become members of the community. When I say members of the community, I do a lot of work outside my municipal work. I'm a consultant for developers. I'm a consultant for homeowners. I do a lot of that. And when somebody wants to change zoning, let's say, on a tract of land, whether it's a single-family lot or 3 square miles, the first thing I do is I go to the community's comprehensive plan and see what it says. And if it says that this ought to be X, and what I want to do is Y, that becomes real problematic, because remember I told you early on that zoning has to comply with the comprehensive plan. Has to comply with the comprehensive plan. So in our comprehensive plan, we built in a component that says that if you're asking for something that's inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, you must first amend the comprehensive plan. And we've done that, I'd say probably a dozen times since 2015 when it was adopted the last time. So that leads me to process. Next slide. And what I really want to talk about is, I want you to talk about what you think an appropriate process would be for updating or modifying the comprehensive plan. I'm going to take notes, but I think it's a discussion that we need to have. You probably saw, I sent out a message, I don't know, last month about a presentation that I did to the council earlier this year about updating the comprehensive plan. If you didn't see it, I didn't include it with this because I've really rethought that. And I want to make sure that you all agree that while you'll be the guiding resources for bringing the comprehensive plan up to date, I want to make sure that the community has a legitimate, well-founded opportunity to participate in the process. Because our comprehensive plan is in sections, elements, it's easy to fix one. For instance, if you wanted to adjust the future land use plan, pretty easy to do. You take it out, you fix it, you put it back. Future land use map, take it out, put it back. Any of these things are easy to do. But when I want to talk about economic development, we don't have an economic development section, but we should have one. Lots of comp plans have an economic development section. So we just have to make that up. But we can redo the whole thing, or we can do it a piece at a time, or several pieces at a time. But I want to make sure that whatever solution the commission, the council, and you all come up with works for the community. Because I can go to my office and I can write up a comprehensive plan, and I know exactly what you need. I'm telling you, I know exactly. And if you believe that, I've got this bridge in Brooklyn, because I don't live here. So I can write it up, but it's me telling you what I think you need. What I want you to do is I want you as the community to tell me, the commission, and the council what you as the community need, not me. So that's what I'm looking for, some input from you all about how you think we ought to go forward with this. What's the process for us to update the comprehensive plan? One more comment before we start the discussion. The front end of the comprehensive plan is a lot of demography and historical stuff. I think that if you're going to update that over the next year or so, that component, I think it's the first 2 or 3 chapters, needs to wait until all the information from the census is available for us, and that will give us a much truer picture of where we are and give you the guidance that you need about the future. Because from the time we wrote that, 2014, 2015, till today, I got to tell you, I think you've probably doubled or maybe more than that in population, because it's been growing like a weed. I mean, it's really, really going. So, first question is, how do you think we should include the public? I don't have the answer, but I will find it. It's a good question. Right. Okay. I don't have the answer, but I've written that down, and I will find out when we can anticipate the information from the census. The last time we had a census, they kind of parceled it out in pieces. So population, demographics, that kind of stuff may come in multiple bites. But I understand the question, and I'll find out from the Census Bureau when we can expect the pieces to start coming in.
Second part of that is just educational. North Texas community government has census data. What's the best non-census data for demographic and census data?
I refer to to North Central Texas Council of Governments a lot, and their information is online. You don't have to be a member, although we are a member. Are we a member, Lisa?
Yes, and they do have good information. They actually survey all the cities, and they get current building permit information from everyone, so they actually stay pretty up to date.
And an interesting thing, when we did this the last time, population cohort is a family. The average family size in 2014 in our community was 3.2 people. 3.2 people. Yeah. I mean, that meant there were some families that had 8 kids, and there were some families that didn't have any kids. And some families were just one person. But the average was 3.2. I kind of think that we may have gone up population. I know that we've gone up population-wise, but I think our family size may have gone up too, because it seems to me that there are a lot more kids out and about than there were 8, 9 years ago. So, impact of the census, when we can start expecting it, and what the true effect will be on your work as we go forward with updating the comprehensive plan.
The Census Regional Director for our area is Ed Coverst. We could reach out to him to see if he could give us an updated timeline of when we could probably expect those numbers.
Are you going to do that, council member?
I could do that.
It's your job. I'm putting it down. Right. Did everybody hear his question? The question was, let me repeat it for the record, if you will. What changes have been made by the Texas legislature since our comprehensive plan was adopted? One of the things that would affect, if you remember, if you look in the comprehensive plan, in the community design piece, there's a lot of information about materials. And the state legislature at the last legislative session, which was 2 years ago, January, decided that any building exterior material that was allowed in the International Building Code was an allowable exterior material. We don't have any, so when you get in there, you see that we've got some constraints in there. You can't have tin, you can't have, that folded metal like is on roofs and places. Well, that's an exterior material that's allowed in the building code, and so if somebody wanted to have that on their building, we could not fight that, because the state law today says that anything that's allowed by the building code, and the other thing is, you don't have the authority to amend it out of the building code. I mean, there are some things we've done to the building code, but you cannot modify that. So that's a big thing, Jim. And I think that that's the only real thing that may adversely affect the comprehensive plan. One other thing that the state did the last go-around was they made it much more difficult for annexations to occur. Whether you're at general law city like we are, or a home rule city like Fate. You just can't go out and willy-nilly, if you're Fate, and say, we want to annex this and that and this and that. Can't do that anymore. In fact, for us, it's always been somebody has to petition the council to come into the city. And you're going to be seeing one of those very soon, probably in January, maybe February. We've got some property that's in the extraterritorial jurisdiction that wants to come into the city. So we'll probably be doing an annexation January or February. Okay, so how do we, given the timing for the census data, how do we best serve the citizens of McLendon-Chisholm in the recreation of the comprehensive plan, or does the comprehensive plan need to be updated? I'm going to tell you, I think it does. I wrote it, and I think it needs to be updated because things have changed a lot in the last 6 years. And so the public participation to me is a critical element to having a successful tool for the community and for the people who want to live or build here. And I got a call about a piece of property in McLendon-Chisholm from California today. And the people they're going to close on it in a week or two. And they're moving here from California. And they wanted to know what our rules were. And so it was easy to tell them because they're written. But I didn't tell them everything that's in the comprehensive plan because some of the design standards that are in there don't apply anymore. So how do we include the public? you want me to tell you ways that it's been done in other communities? No, and that's exactly, Jim, that's exactly how a lot of municipalities where I work and where other folks like me work. They'll select a group. Sometimes it's the Planning and Zoning Commission, sometimes it's a special group of citizens appointed like a steering committee to kind of focus the discussions, and then they'll have scheduled meetings and public open meetings. We did one in Crossroads, which is up in Denton County by Denton City proper. It took about a year, and the council there appointed a steering committee, which was made up of some commissioners, a couple of council members, some people off of different boards and commissions, and then maybe a dozen people from the public who were interested in spending the next 10, 12 months working on this. And they would have we'd have one not private, but we had one meeting where it was just kind of a think session every other week, and then we'd have a open meeting for everybody once a month. And that turned out to be a real good model because we got positive input, and when you had the non-totally public meetings, you were able to address all the things that you heard 2 weeks before. And it really made good sense as you fabricated a revision to the comp plan. We did Fort Worth, I don't know, 3 decades ago, I guess. And theirs was different. It was a whole lot different. They had 2 or 3 major community meetings, and then they had a whole bunch of like satellite meetings because Fort Worth is big. And they kind of pulled all that together with subgroups. I'm not suggesting that for McLendon-Chisholm because we're 12 and a half square miles with somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 people. I think we need to have one. If we're going to have a steering committee, that's good, or if we're going to use the Planning and Zoning Commission or whatever the council decides. But I'm looking for ways to best get the public to join with this because this is their plan. One of the things in a former life, I was the planner for a big city, and I did comprehensive plans for sub-areas that included 175,000 people. I mean, it was a lot of folks. And the interesting thing about it is after the plans were done, because it was so many people, they'd go on the shelf and the only people that used them were the staff. The citizens really didn't feel an attachment to it. And what I'd like to see us have is people that want to see it, use it, tell their friends from California, take a look at this. This will tell you everything about where we are today and where we're going to go in the city. So what do you think? Did you all hear what Jim said? And Rockwell has a open space plan. They've got a trails plan. Up until the last comprehensive plan, we had a trails program that was consistent with what the county had. And when I was enforcing that through zoning and plating, it became obvious, and I was not getting any resistance from developers. They were saying, we'll do it. Tell me what it is. It's 8 feet wide, it's concrete, it's a horse path, it's whatever it is. But when it got off the public way and into private property, connecting neighborhood to neighborhood, for instance, it got sticky because the property owners were willing to give us the easement for us to ride our horses across their property. They were willing to do that, but they were not willing to take on the responsibility for you falling off your horse on their property and suing them. They were not willing to do that. And so that section of our comprehensive plan went away. It went away. And I think as we start looking at how we're going to integrate with the county, and we actually have 2 counties, Kaufman County as well. And did we get that interlocal agreement? Okay. So we need, both of those counties, we need to see what they think and how that fits together. And once again, COG, the North Central Texas Council of Governments, can help broker some of those kinds of relationships, because that's what they do. What else?
Leslie, so since the comprehensive plan by statute is a planning and zoning activity, if your planning and zoning thoughts or how you want to move forward, so we don't process on our own, process on our own.
Okay. I mean, I don't know if you guys have any input. I mean, I know we've talked about, we want to make sure we get lots of public input on it. I think most of you are aware of this. I mean, I think our biggest issue that we run into month after month when we have to do things, and I think y'all are aware of this, but the future land use map would probably be our priority, because anytime we have zoning come in front of us, it has to, we have to first amend the future land use map, or it has to match what's in the future land use map. And then, so we have to first do an amendment to the future land use map, and then amend zoning. And I find, Mr. Coker and I talk a lot about spot zoning, and, the future land use map and the zoning map don't match, and they're not going to match. But I think the future land use map would be our top priority, because everything that we do, we try to make sure matches up with the future land use map. I don't like doing changes to the future land use map, and at least that's my opinion, because I feel like we're changing what the intent of the comp plan was, and that's probably extreme, but there is a future land use map, and then whenever we have to change it, we're kind of doing it, little piece by piece, and I think this process is going to be long and probably not long and drawn out. It's probably an exaggeration too, but I think to me that would be our priority, because we talked, I think it was at our last meeting, or maybe it was our meeting, since I attend both meetings, I get them confused, but we can't stop zoning applications in the meantime, but I think we would like to see getting that as the top priority, getting that addressed, so that we feel good about all the zoning applications that we're addressing, because I feel like we're just constantly making tiny little changes to that as we go forward. But as far as, I'll defer to my team here, but as far as the approach, I like the idea of, getting as much public input as I can. The forum for that, I kind of like the idea of, I think this is what you were talking about, but smaller meetings, more of them, to maybe bite off smaller pieces of it. I think if you ask the public to come in and comment on the whole thing at one time, they're going to be like, too much. But I also think we have to be cautious, again, my opinion, but I think we have to be cautious of asking them to attend 6 meetings, because they're gonna get tired of it too. So there's, what that perfect balance is, I don't know, but because I don't know, I feel like I see the same people at McLendon-Chisholm meetings all the time, so I don't know how much participation we're going to see outside a lot of the people in this room and a few others that come to everything, but I think especially when it comes to the maps and whatnot, to me, I think of the maps and the basic principles that are in here as being the things I want to make sure we've given the public lots of opportunity to comment on.
Yeah, my thought is I agree with you, because having read the plan, so structurally, there's 70%, 75% of his plan, the words can change a little bit, but the bottom line
I would agree.
is the structure.
I would agree.
So it's really the meat that's in that structure that what matters. And so that was very helpful. I think that you focus on those things that are and I like the idea of a series of meetings where we have work sessions with
They're regulations.
Basically, their comprehensive plan for subdivision versus development.
Interestingly enough, if I can jump in our extraterritorial jurisdiction, you're all familiar with what that is. It's that half a mile around the city limits. That's not in the city, but we get to approve all the plats, subdivisions that are out there. Ron Merritt, who does the same thing for the county that I do for the city, and I work together on each and every plat that comes in the extraterritorial jurisdiction. And I think that, I was talking to Ron a couple of weeks ago, I think that they have now passed their revisions to the subdivision regulations at the county. I'll confirm that, but I think that has been done. So we work hand in glove with the county when something is going on in our extraterritorial jurisdiction. Not land use. We can't tell people that you can't have a chicken farm when you're adjacent to a house. We can't do that. We can't tell people they can't have a mobile home park out there because that's a land use. But we can say that if you're going to have a mobile home park, the county requires that you have an acre and a half or an acre of land for an on-site sanitary sewer system, and that's what you're going to have. So we can't regulate land use. But interestingly enough, because almost all the property in our ETJ is covered by our fire department, we also get to enforce fire regulations out there, which means that we can deal with roads in a much more beneficial way for the fire department, because the fire department requires emergency access roadways that have to meet certain requirements. So you can't just go out there and blade it off and throw down some hot patch and say you're done. What else? Okay, the question was, focus groups and surveys, are they beneficial? Absolutely. Awesome. In fact, the last time we did the comprehensive plan, I had floated the idea of doing that, and it didn't pass muster at the council level because of the cost, but we now have a pretty good system where I think we could do some surveys and have some focus groups as a part of that public participation program. Because I think the more people we get involved with this process, the better result we will have. And I mean, there are people who live in the community and have lived here for decades, but there are also people that are moving in every day from someplace else. And they're bringing with them their thoughts and the reasons that they moved here in the first place. And we have a lovely community. And a lot of people want to live here because it's really nice. Low taxes. Let me go back to what you were saying about roads, though. Now, the road thing is a big deal. I think we've got maybe three linear miles of roadway that the city is responsible for. Three. That's responsible. But there is a lot more road system out there that belongs to the private property owners that are adjacent to it, or to the HOA where it's located. Mira Vista, that entire loop road system out there belongs to the homeowners association. It's not ours. And one of the things that when we were going through this process the last time, the council made it real clear that the operating and maintenance costs for roadway systems can far outstrip your budget in a very short period of time. In most jurisdictions, a roadway, whether it's a local road or a collector or a larger street, have about a 30-year design life, 30 years. So when a subdivision, and I think that he's right on, there are going to be a lot of subdivisions that have got older infrastructure. They're going to be looking to the city, and then some of them are not really subdivisions. They're just areas that have a lot of homes. Dow Road, it's really a county road, but the county's looking for us to maintain it. Okay, I like the 15.9-cent tax rate, and I think a lot of other people do too. But once you start, as we're thinking about roadways, and he's absolutely right, we need to be thinking about that, because ultimately the private citizen's not going to be able to write a check to replace a 24-foot wide reinforced concrete street. It's not going to happen. So collectively, as we're thinking about this, really think about it, because the last time we did this, the council was opposed to taking on any more responsibility for public streets because of the cost. Okay, so far, let me recap on what I've heard you give me as far as input about process. We need to have information from the census as a component part of updating the comprehensive plan. That's one thing. The timing of when we get that information, we're not certain about, but Councilmember Dahl has said that he would take the initiative and tell us how that's going to be distributed. Then we've also talked about having, I'm not sure a steering committee is the right term, but a group that is going to lead the revisions and would have smaller groups to focus on elements, maybe the Economic Development Subcommittee or committee becomes a group that is responsible for hashing out a new component, being the economic development piece. And maybe there's somebody else that wants to do with public facilities. In our current plan, we have a public facilities component, and it recommends things like a new fire station, which I think we're getting pretty close to having. But there are other things that we may, as a community, think are really important. I mean, I don't know the answer to this. My youngest kid is 44, so soccer is not on my dance card, although her babies play soccer. But is that a public facility that the community thinks would be an important asset? And should the city be responsible for it? I'm not answering these questions. These are just hypotheticals. Should the city be responsible for it, or should we try and convince a developer to do that for us? That kind of stuff, when we are thinking about these small groups, somebody gets the work done, then we share the work that we've done with the larger community at a larger public meeting, whether you do it through online stuff, surveys, focus groups, community meetings. And I think that based on my history with the community here, the largest meeting that I have ever been to, we had at the church. And it was for the last community meeting for the adoption of the current comprehensive plan. And there were a lot of people there. I mean, it was standing room only. And I think that that's the kind of input I'd like to get when we're taking bite-sized pieces, because if you tried to get all of it in front of the community as a whole, you're never going to get anywhere, because there's too much. There's too much data. So I think that structurally, bite-sized pieces, yeah, it takes a little longer, but it gives us a chance to work on it. Let the community know that we heard what they said about this piece, and here's how we dealt with it. Have them get another look at it. And at the end of the day, after we get it to a point where we think we've got a real deal, then you share the whole thing at a big community meeting. We go over it. We ask the Planning and Zoning Commission to consider it at a public hearing. They make their recommendation to the council. The council does the same thing. And at the end of the day, if we've done our job, if we've done our work, then the council says, yeah, this is good stuff, and this is going to be the rules that we're going to use for the future. But I think that what you've told me so far is census data, small groups, bite-sized pieces, lots of community inclusion, and make sure that we take into account both Rockwall County and Kaufman County plans that will have an effect on us. I mean, I just got a copy of the Rockwall updated thoroughfare plan. And I've been working on 205. So I started working for the city in 2012. And they changed the alignment. And I've been getting right-of-way for 8 years for a different alignment. So it's important for us to have that continuing relationship so that so I don't get a whole bunch of land from Jim that he gave to me because he wanted to plat and get a building permit. And now I've got it and we're not going to use it. So that relationship is good. Yes, ma'am. Well, that was the last meeting. We had two or three other meetings. It was before we had the city hall. I don't. Oh, that's true too. Was it? Because I remember that meeting down there, and it seemed to me like we discussed the comprehensive plan, but it was tax rate. Yeah. That's true. But it still was the biggest meeting I've ever been to here. Let me ask a question then. Do you think that we should hire somebody who has a skill set to help design that kind of instrument? Or do you think it's something we can work up ourselves? Okay.
I'd have to look it up. I just work here, but I would urge you to consider taking a little bit of the surplus money that we made this last year, and consider hiring a company, a professional company that does have that skill set. You can tell them the topics that you're interested in and have them formulate those questions for you and find a way to distribute that to the public.
But Lisa's being on the last survey, participation. We spent a lot of time on surveys like that. Yeah, my opinion is following the surveys and following in our site that we're not further to.
I think too, when we take our hands off of it a little bit and you hire a company, I think it will help your participation rates and the legitimacy of those results when they come back. I think people will kind of respect those results a little bit. So giving them the topics, that's great. But then when they formulate the questions and they put it out and then they get the results and hand them to you in a little booklet or whatever it is and present them to you, somehow it's a little bit cleaner. I think it just takes that bias away, and it takes any question about, who wrote those questions, and was there some sort of any weird intent, or were we trying to get one answer or the other answer? And sometimes the surveys are very long, and they get a little tedious. And anyway, I think there are companies that that's just what their specialty is. And if you're ever going to spend any money, I think it would just be money well spent.
All good points. Let me refer you to the comprehensive plan on very close to the front. The city's mission statement establishes the overarching guide for this plan to serve and protect its citizens while preserving our heritage and planning for the future. That's the mission statement for the city. It's on the plaque outside in the hall. Yeah, you're looking, right. No, but I understand. And I think that's going back to what Leslie said about the future land use plan, because that's where the meat of your comprehensive planning comes in. What do the citizens, and I like the idea about different neighborhoods may have different attitudes, because if you live in Sonoma Verde, you're probably on a much smaller piece of property than where you live. Yeah, I mean, or Kingsbridge, all of them are an acre or so, some of them bigger. But I think it's a good idea to have that kind of focus, and I like the things that you brought up. What else? So you don't think that I should create a survey that says, are you still beating your children, yes or no? I like that as an idea. One of the things that we've wrestled with since my time here is getting people that want to participate. Because we have a lot of folks that work, you know, at a job away from their house all day, you know, like I do. And it's tough to get people to volunteer. But I absolutely agree, Jim, that's an important component. And the more people that we can get to participate in the smaller groups, and the more people we can get to participate in the larger groups, the better off we're going to be. Because like I was saying, you know, former life, I'd write lots of plans. My staff would write lots of plans. And the community never used the plan because they weren't really part of the plan. And so we sat in our office, we knew exactly what they needed, and we cooked the plan up. And by golly, it was their plan, even though they didn't have anything to do with it. And I've learned a lot of lessons that, you know, I guess maybe I had 35 community plans that we worked, and we did a lot of community work with the community. But those plans never got the kind of traction that I'd like to see this community have. Because the ownership of the document. I think that the price was $2,000 back in 2014. It would probably be a little bit more now, and anything that you have to put out for bid is going to take time. So, but I'm not sure what do we have to put out for bid? Anything over 50,000? Okay, so theoretically, we could identify a group of prospective vendors that could do a survey for us and get them to tell us how much it's going to cost, and I think that the commission and the council then could make a decision on whether or not we wanted to hire somebody like that. It would help us get to yes a whole lot quicker, though.
It's not what
It is not. We could do a budget amendment.
All right, so I'd like to, let's see, 7:41. I want to be out of here by 8, because I have to drive to Red Oak, which is where my place is. But that's not why I want to leave. The real reason is I don't want you to be burned out. I mean, and probably you haven't had dinner or anything else. Leslie? No, I see the Planning and Zoning Commission as kind of the focal group, and then we add everybody else to that group. No, yeah, no, my intent seeing as I don't get to choose, but if I did get to choose, I would choose the Planning and Zoning Commission to be the central focus for the update to the comprehensive plan. I would choose that. All right, so the thing that we didn't do and we're not going to do tonight is 4.3 on our agenda, review of relative current comprehensive plan elements. you can do that on your own. There are pieces in there in 5 of the sections at least that have an economic development component at one level or another. The open space, the community facilities, the future land use plan, the transportation system. And what it is transportation plan, because it really deals with everything other than your local streets. And what I think we're talking about is maybe adding a much stronger piece that deals with local streets. And the thing about streets that have been out there for 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, or in some cases longer, they become a real sticky wicket. Frontier is a problem. Yeah, well, no, I mean, it's a problem. So how do you fix it? I know, but I drove out there one day and I found in one of those potholes, I found a yellow Volkswagen. Okay. Well, good. So, the last thing I wanted to talk to you about is this town center concept. And are you all familiar with the West Village in Dallas, which is near Uptown, or the shops at Legacy in Plano, at Waters Creek in Flower Mound? Yes. And those are larger, they're larger scale because those are communities with a lot more people. But what do you think as a group about having something like that in our city? Sure. So are you suggesting that by and large there's some support for the concept? And that's why I brought this map, which maybe a little bit difficult for you to see. I took off all the underlying junk and just outlined the city limits there. This is 205. And I think one of you said something about all of our zoning retail businesses in the 205. As a planner, I hate that. I couldn't change the last time that I got a chance to. still get the energy from the population that are there on equipment, there, and you get out off of the parade at 2 o'clock. It's 2 o'clock, yeah, and then, hang in there, you walk back, it's really 60 miles an hour. That's not very pedestrian road. So,
I think some of the other things that you do, like the only place in the city that we have set a sewer system that comes through is along like this. From, there's one area on 205 and then back out this. There's not a lot of sewer base, so when you want to bring in a business, it's pretty difficult to bring business in a separate area. It's fine. It's very difficult to expand that exponentially. I'm certain if you're going to have some kind of way to provide them all the services, water, sewer, this kind of thing. You got to look at locations where economic activity.
that's right. And the other thing is, you have to have enough geography to do it. Because you not only do you need access to the point, to the acreage where you have to provide for parking. Remember that in the planning environment, parking is the tail that wags the dog. Okay? So you gotta have parking. And you also have to make it pedestrian friendly. And you gotta have ways for both of those things, cars and people, to mingle. So you gotta have enough land. There are lots of places in the city where we have a lot of land. And what I'm hearing the commission say is that they like the idea of having kind of a town center environment. And the next thing is, where would be the appropriate locations to do that? And especially reinforce that western improvement area. So you want to do it off the main street, but maybe you have access to it from the main street. So what do you think?
Well, let me address something. As you can see, on the northern end of the city, right there where Park 49 is, there's a section there that we're going to put a shopping center with that little triangle. 205 and Park 49, that's going to be a shopping center over there. That's outside of the city. But our customers are going to our citizens center where they shop. The same thing as you see down in the snow country, with cross the street from snow country, right across the road, we're serving around and do something there. I don't know what
The
it is.
gas station.
Gas station.
Because we're starting to see a lot of this on either end of our city, so do we want to co-locate, just go in those locations, or we don't have a lot of land in either of those places? So where's the location within the city? Coming out by this way, you know, you got to get the tax people down there, right? If you're talking about 205, that's going to be a 60 million area, we're going to want people passing through our city. That's a lot of revenue. Right now, today, we have all of our citizens go somewhere else to do shopping. Well, we have to go do some people who are traveling through to their dollars to the tax revenue. People who don't live in the city. So we're going to do that. I think about that.
No, I mean, that's the kind of input that I'm looking for is how do we create this environment? Because Jim's point about 205, it's going to become a major thoroughfare. It already is. I mean, it ought to be 4 lanes divided today. But it's going to become a major thoroughfare as development, coffee, Carroll, Gordon, Southern Heath, I mean, all of that, as it's developing, that's going to be their main access route through the city. If you got some revenue, sales traffic along that strip, that would be excellent. But I don't think we should strip out, like we have done already, 205, which retail zoning on both sides. In our current ordinance that establishes the retail in the business strip zoning is predicated on the alignment of 205 from the ordinance and Councilmember?
Yeah, Mr. Coker, for the size of our city, what would be a reasonable expectation range of acreage needed for a facility like that?
Based on my preliminary review, I think that somewhere between 50 and 100 acres is what we would need. What do you think? Yes, you.
Well, I mean, it would depend on what's available. I haven't really thought about the size. I think you have to look at what you have to work with. And if there's a lot that's not available, where you want to put it. And
Okay, so let me talk about size for a second, and I think that was a good question. I've been wrestling with this because while we're at, say, 3,000, 3,500 people today, we're going to be 5,000 well before the next census. And just the next few phases of Simone and Birdie. So, this is 550, dual car. We have a lot of land here, big chunks of undeveloped land. This is, large area, you know, this, you got Queen Bridge and all this stuff. The church is here. So we've got some property in our EJ that's large lots. And we just changed the comprehensive plan and the zoning on a couple of acres here adjacent to Davis Lane. And this was Davis. But then when you head on back down, here's approximately phase 4, I think, 3 or 4. Cemetery, when you get down here, the old, there's a fire station and the old city hall. A lot of that. Yes, it is, but only, I'd say 50 feet, 50 or 60 feet. That comes this way. The area I was trying to take is you've got quite a bit of land back in these areas that is vacant, and then on the other side, a substantial chunk. Now, this doesn't show where the floodplains are and that kind of stuff. That starts having an effect on available land. But along 205, if you think 205 is a good point of entry, you start thinking about, and you don't have to do it today, but start thinking about that now driving around and taking a look at what's available and what's for sale. And something to start. I think that most of the cities that are back there, when you get to the car, it's probably more of the people outside the city. People who go to people, build with your construction people that you can stop at the farm for the rent and all that. I don't know how many people you can do it, regular construction. Well, I live in well, and most of the change in the right of way is up on the northern end. Then there's not so much change down in the southern end with the current line. I've been picking up right of way, 25 feet on both sides of the railroad bridge, so I can take it to catch that loss. That's what I've been doing down there. I've been doing that up here as well. I think I'm actually going to shift it over to about 50 or 60 years. No, that's all right. Yes.
I'm looking all over the map at scale. Thank you all for that. Thank you very much. Just for a sense of scale, I mean, 640 acres is one square mile. So a quarter by a quarter by a quarter by a quarter mile. What would that look like? That's about 160 acres. Because we're talking about a big development along 205. You don't have space. You know, it looks like it's that big one, but March actually coming in. And that alley was, you got a
agree.
You know what I'm saying? I think it's really easy to look at this and have transition.
God bless Legacy, East and West, you know, glad they're doing well up there. I am not interested in that here.
And that's too much.
Something that needs the character of the city. We're going to be true to our character. We need to be rural. We need to be open. You know, maybe something more like what Keith has done, right, around under service. You know, that is a multi-purpose thing, kind of concept on it, and I'm okay with that. If Apple wanted to put a store here, I'm not sure that would be the right thing.
And this is my idea, someone else in our group brought this up to the group was, you know, in thinking with the open space that Rockwell found trying to do, to develop like this co-live area so that people outside of McLendon-Chisholm, and I'm just speaking somebody else's idea, that might draw folks here to enjoy that open space and then sit down and dinner with the family. That's my time, Scott, that was just an idea.
Yeah, I think for that, I see a lot of standard service.
Yeah.
And what it's been
Let's do it on their own.
it's, you know, a half dozen businesses, eight businesses, grocery store, nice restaurant, right, that has an open venue. I mean, that, so smoke monkeys a little less, but that fits the community, right? So something like that. I'm not a big fan of South Lake and, you know, this, what I consider to be artificial pool that a developer is going to improve. It's a lot of concrete, it's a lot of cars.
I agree. I agree with you. I think that that is our mission statement and how we want to word it. Open spaces, we don't need to do anything, nothing, we're not central, we're not operating. You know, we just maintain, but regardless, I think we can do whatever we're trying to focus on. So that's what I'm looking about bringing too much business, because on what you're saying, you don't want to bring in too much concrete, too much stuff that's going to not fit with our community. You know, we need to think about what kinds of businesses we bring in. I mean, not anything else.
Right. I mean, what you're trying to do, I think, right? I mean, it's, you're moving, and that's the kind of community-based, retail that I'm you know, I don't go to the sign, not because I don't gas, or I don't buy, you know, milk once in a while. That's just, yeah, I'm an important business. This is not representative of what we want. I want those two ideas.
And that's really why I'm talking about a smaller scale to fit with the community. That's where 50 to 100 acres, it sounds like a lot if you're trying to mow it, and that's what I do, but it's not so much when you have to have building footprints and parking and pedestrian ways and buildings. It's not so much.
I think we could make it with keeping the town on the road, like they put on the graders, they've got the public, the drive-in there, they're supposed to build,
Yep.
offices and type of thing.
Yep. There's 9 lots on the entrance.
There's already some existing lots that are, you know, on 205, right there next to, 5 acre,
Right.
We'd have to go out and see what the public has to do, but I mean, we have 2 or 3 different options that we could put out.
Right.
One
Okay.
of them is, we set up a future subdivision. That one lot down there, just before we get to the other subdivision. Just when you're in the farm, or
Yeah, that's called Triple Creek. It's zoned already, but that zoning is gonna, I'm thinking, it ultimately goes away because they weren't able to develop it in accordance with the plans. And that was one other thing I forgot to mention was planned development districts. In fact, I'm going to go back to that now. Thank you for bringing it up. Okay. I need to go back to zoning for 1 second. An hour and a half. Zoning districts. Remember we talked about zoning districts, but we do allow what are called planned development districts here in the McLendon-Chisholm. Planned development districts are customized zoning. So when you look at the map, if you don't know what Triple Creek Planned Development District is, I would recommend that you try and find out because it's 1,300 acres and it has the authority to do 1,500 homes. And it's got 3 drainage ways that go right through. The point here is that this whole area, all of this, and this around here, is all part of the Creek Ranch. But there's a couple of areas, like right down in here, this is the cemetery. This area right here, if you have these 4 lots, this area is 100 acres. I'm not trying to lead this discussion, but start thinking in the concept that if you want it to be scaled to the community, it needs to not be the villages, the West Village, or any of that stuff, because that's really big. But if you want something that's scaled to the size and needs of the community, you need to start looking at somewhere between 50 and 100 acres in order to have the correct population density, the parking. Yes, there's going to be concrete, but wrapping retail around a little parking garage, for instance, or a parking lot makes all the sense in the world, because then the cars are not the main focus. The people and the retail becomes the main focus. And with 50 to 100 acres, you can actually do a design that'll do that for you. And not only that, you can get the gas for 10 cents less up at the racetrack. Oh, but I think, Paul, that's a really good point, because I'm not sure that you can't create an environment that can cater to both, depending on your design. But if it turns out that your main focus is the passing through, then strip really makes good sense. Strip zoning makes good sense because it gives you lots of choices. The downside is it gives you lots of choices. And if you're going to cater to the community, which I think ultimately you need to serve the community, maybe it's a different mix. And how you address it, not Mike Coker, but how you all address it becomes really important. And I think you need to kind of decide how you want to deal with it early in that decision process.
One of the things about the center that I always is to look at places in the community that have been able to create Strict commercial all around is also what agriculture is talking about, because you have to create a lot of variance, you know?
I do.
So having it centralized having it centralized cuts down on that getting variance and then variance all the way down the road. As well as, for me, the ride home, when I ride home, I stop and I watch business, I want to see the people selling what's in their yard. I want to see the nursery, you know,
Yeah.
nursery on one side and then that one that just came on down probably on
Mhm.
we've got horses for sale. I love that kind of thing. But I like to see, that, having it centralized, it's better in so many ways.
And I think that's a good point. Let me say, there's one thing in the comprehensive plan currently that requires that if you're doing a commercial subdivision, say Jack Pullen's property there, adjacent to Pullen Road and 205, it has the equivalent of 5 commercial lots in it, but they have to be interconnected so that you really only have 2 driveways, one off of Pullen Road and one off of 205. And that provides access to all of those, because we're trying to reduce the number of driveways along 205, because 205 is a hazardous street. Because, I mean, the question is, given the fact that we've got a long stretch of currently zoned commercial property along 205, how difficult is it to change? It's not difficult at all. Council has the authority, the planning and zoning commission has the authority to call a public hearing to consider the proper zoning on any piece of land in the city. Can do that with proper notice. The challenge then is, if you do it to somebody who wants to keep their zoning, and stuck with the wrath of the electorate, and you become just another citizen instead of being on council. So that it's easy to do if you've got the political will, but when you do that, remember that there will be blowback, because somebody who currently has commercial zoning, they want to give it up because they think that's a bird's nest on the ground, whether it is or not. They may be paying property taxes at the county and local level as though it was something other than raw land, because of the zoning. And lots of municipalities, you find that commercial property is paying the same tax rate, but it's appraised at a whole lot more because it's multifamily instead of single family, where it's
retail instead of city planning, that kind of stuff. So I think the tools are in place to do it that, I would suggest to you that if we end up doing the town center thing, that we get to something right for that, and not mess with the other stuff. And as somebody wants to fight, for instance, we decide how we're going to deal with that. And maybe recommend that they request a change in zoning to be more consistent with the comprehensive plan. Whether that was right when we're done. Rather than just wholesale going out and changing the zone. I gotta say, I have never wanted to be an elected official. And I don't ever want to be an elected official because all of the opinions. Even if you think they're good.
But over there, we've got deal with it, we've got Joe, and we got an issue today, we've got a lot of businesses on it, someone, we have, with the way the zone goes, there's people who will have opinions.
And so one of the things that I probably need to have a session with the city council to tell them what the tools are that they have available and have that reinforced by our city attorney. That the state law allows planning and zoning commission or the city council call a public hearing to determine proper zoning. Now, when you send out a notice, you put it in the newspaper, you have a public hearing, it requires the planning and zoning commission to make a recommendation. Council will have a public hearing and make a decision. And you can do that.
Correct me if I'm
I'm
wrong.
hesitant to tell you that that's the approach that I would take.
You correct me if I'm wrong, but, because all that is zoned commercial right now, even though it's not commercial on the future land use map, someone could go open a business right now today, they don't have to come to us, they don't have to ask permission, it's zoned commercial today, so
Just to do that.
that makes it harder to fight it later, because they can now say, I have this, extremely profitable business sitting here in downtown, and it doesn't fit in the zoning, so that is a problem, if the zoning is
And
not matching.
there's another component of that has to do with vested rights. And in a lot of jurisdictions, not necessarily Texas, but in a lot of jurisdictions, communities that have taken vested rights, even though you didn't have a plan, you just had the zoning. Yeah, the city was able to take it away, but you had to compensate the property owner for the loss in the potential revenue that their zoning would have provided. You don't have that in Texas, but there's jurisdictions in states around us that have gone through that. Anyway, it is 8:17.
Just wanted to make one quick comment, because I don't know this, and this economic study is what we discovered in one of the public comments. What do they want? If they come down and say, oh, well, we want to do something for us. We do have limited space to do this, and so we vested in six businesses that would service us. We go along the plan that we started here, and we could, and that's going to determine where we go. Obviously, we're not going to need a bunch of driveways going down 205 if we know that we're going to be designing this thing from us.
said, the county, we're taking use of land that wouldn't be able to be used for anything else, but we could look into some of them, the value to both us and the city, and attract people from outside the city to come to us.
When could you think the city is just like, leaving it, so it's like,
Well, first off, we gotta go through, we need to get the census information, and then we need to get the survey of the people, find out what these kind of people they want. Once we've got the idea of where we wanna go to, that's when we start going to talk to, like, Rockland County, Rockwell County, and see what's in their art of possible, what can we do by working together.
Well, we don't have to wait for the census information to be started.
we could start it out.
Yeah, I mean, we need the census information.
It's gonna take a while to get that survey,
Yeah.
because it gets sent, we're gonna have to wait for them, and so I'm just saying that we should be doing both those back at the same time.
Exactly.
Things have sort of changed for us too, because we thought we were going to have the reform starting this year.
2022, 2023, yeah.
Now it's what is it?
2025, for that.
25, right? So we were kind of, well, do we really want to start building anything, or suggesting building anything, when we're going to have all this construction?
I think we still need to go, because the way that moves back and forth with tech dot, it could be, they move it out, and they can always pull it back to if they get it done.
They're gonna have those plans ready in 2022. So I would say we need to keep 2022 as the target. They're just currently starting.
We're starting.
But they started acquiring the library.
Yeah.
Well, they're saying the plans will be ready to let, and they'll have all their right of way utilities done by 2022.
Something to keep in our,
And if they have all that done, as soon as they find money, they'll start going.
So my direction to you as a group is start thinking about the places that would make the most sense for a town center kind of retail area. With it. And it doesn't have to be 205, but 205 is carrying just under 30,000 trips a day today. And 550 is carrying just under 1,000 trips a day. So those are the two major thoroughfares in the city. It's obvious that if getting a sales tax component from people passing through is an important element of this. 205 needs to have some point of access to the street concept.
intersections, we sort of.
Not necessarily, I think that's something that just, we may want to do, maybe not on to the side, but it's a destination, and then we want to do that, the venue is going to be right down to the side. Something that would draw people from Beach and Rockwell, well, like I said, they're not going to be necessarily on 205 and 550, it could be somewhere off. That we just to draw people who have money, who want to come and spend money in our town, but also people within our own town who want to go there, something that they need attraction. We don't have a lot of nice restaurants and things like that. John, you talked about that place there in San Marcos, the restaurant road. I don't know that's the right idea, but something that would draw people to want to come there and spend money.
Well, the 205 though is sort of a gold mine for us almost, is the traffic. Sometimes, we're situated very well to take advantage of this and sort of write the plan for what we want there, because we do have a great situation, even though gives us a bit more leverage, I feel like, for the people who will come in to develop this.
I would like
Maybe something else.
would like to bring it to the both groups' attention that City Council did fund the comprehensive plan for this latest budget cycle, the 2021 budget cycle. So our current comprehensive plan is dramatically out of date. There's a lot of things in it that are either completely missing, like the economic development section, or certain aspects of it that do not comply with current Texas state law. So the council is very motivated to try to get this done not only as productively as possible, but since we did have it budgeted in this fiscal year's budget, to actually, hopefully, to get it done within this fiscal year's budget.
I have all my changes right here.
So I don't see Mr. Coker, he wants to read, I just have a couple things just have a couple things that I needed to talk to council and to Lisa about, like about giving the census data, you already got that, the task to do. But then
Email's
also,
already sent.
How do we move forward and getting the survey, how do we?
I'd be happy to go out and, request some quotes from some companies if you'd like and bring those back.
Get the city down to the food before we do anything like that.
Sure.
That was all I wanted to know, see,
I think we could probably fold those into the comprehensive plan update.
We'd really like to get to work as soon as we can.
We'd like that as well.
Yeah, we'd like that as well. But
And-
even with the lack of the survey and the lack of the current census, Economic Development Committee still has the complete open potential to draft the economic development side of the comprehensive plan in the meantime.
Yeah, we will do that, take that on, things like that. And then I think we can all do the same thing about it, let's go to the, let's take a look out there and let's see if, who's got ideas on where they think the best location would be for a city center or a centralized business district, and let's get them all in there, get through the chance to put input, and then let's kind of, focus down to one or two different areas, and then maybe that's what we put out there on a survey, and then get the people's like, get your.
Are we in agreement with that? City center? I mean, I think we're all in agreement with the business development needs to be rebuilt. The question, I think, is do we, I am not, I can't say I'm supportive of the city center because I don't know what that is. How big is that? How big is that? And I'm, so I can, in my mind, I can get the kind of concept, using an example, something like that. If it's something that I've seen, outside of other communities, large communities, I'm not up for that.
May I make a suggestion? Do you think maybe at the next meeting, Mike, it might be somewhat reasonable that maybe we could just put together a slideshow of some examples of, and you guys could just give us a thumbs up, you like it, a thumbs down, you don't. Melody could show her examples. I could bring some things that I've seen. You hate it, you love it, we can kind of compile the things, throw out the things that you don't like, and at least start kind of narrowing them down so we can just get an idea of what, what you like and what you don't like, so we can just kind of start narrowing it just a little bit. I think you've got to have a starting point.
Because if you just put up a survey, what do you want, then not.
So to me, that's fine. I mean, coming in and designing a survey is kind of cool, right? To kind of figure it out. But, back to the original point that Matthew pointed out is we don't really know what the public wants. We get a huge amount of hours towards running things that would be concept and then the public comes up and says, we don't want that. We don't want that at all.
Public doesn't always know what they want either. Sometimes that's why I did this, because I kind of felt like, well, we need to start this place, we need some sort of example to start.
Well, I mean, a town center can look like an old-fashioned town square. It could look like a downtown strip, like it does in Roy City or Wiley. I mean, it could look. There's a lot of examples.
They're built off the historic center.
Right.
We're, so I'll dream and say we're going to be 5,000 people for census. I never have to go there, but it's going to be close. Somewhere between 3,500 and call it 4,000, where I think it's going to land. So show me some concepts relative to scale for a city that size, I'm okay. But
whether there's something that is built there or not. That goes to that vested rights concept.
I think it was probably doing a such a survey, would be, have something like 3 or 5 different options that people could, then vote on, and see whether it's I'm thinking like the city center, or something that maybe in conjunction with the city hall, the fire department, that kind of thing. That's one thing. The other concept is just a small business area that consolidates all the businesses have to be in this area. The other one would be all along 205, and put into some kind of combination of those kind of things, and give those in the survey, and then allow the people to go in and decide. Then based on the responses, you say, okay, the majority wants this, okay, that's what we focus our time on. I mean, most of the people are going to probably like that, so they will centralize whatever that is.
So is the question taking the commercial business off of 205 and just maybe shifting that over to a centralized place? Is that the goal, or is it to keep that 205 strict and then also have a centralized place?
To take the fear of that with the road, the concern for safety, and then, just having the growth out there, to having businesses start up and fail, and not having somebody else go in there and think that that's property over.
Okay, so we're like just from shifting over, like having the same maybe area of business, but just shifting it over to a centralized.
Well,
Just taking it off 205 and then.
except from Via Toscana to 205, because we just put in a sewer line.
Yeah, I'm trying to be understanding. So if I have a home on 205 right now, right, we serve a lot of homes on 205, and there is a lot of homes in the 205 area that are currently commercially zoned. They're homeowners. They're owned by somebody. And I'm just having difficulty understanding how we. So we're going to say to that homeowner or that landowner, we're going to increase or decrease the value of your land. Arbitrarily. Not you. You are one person. We, the city, are going to do that.
That was a question that I asked because of, how do you go about doing something like that? And, cities do that all the time. Don't change the, piece of property.
Doesn't make it right.
No, I know it doesn't make it right, but you're looking for the greater good for the city than, each individual. I know that some people aren't going to like that, but the reality is this about the city or is it about the individual?
So I think the real question, I'm less interested in what the citizens think about geography for businesses. I'd be more interested in what they want to do in terms of shopping in their city. If they want to be able to shop for a whole range of things in their city that's different, then I'm very happy driving up the person. Hypothetically, somebody saying, no, I'm happy driving to work. Basically convenience services here, but I don't need to have a cell phone repair place.
It's like she was talking about the drive home. A lot of people moved out here because they want to open. They don't want to store every 8 mile or whatever. So I think the big thing is to sort of, before we move much further at all, because it could come back there all to a man or woman, so we don't want to use.
Well, we can be very consistent, and we don't need to survey the population of McLendon-Chisholm. I can tell you, they want single homes, large lot sizes, quiet businesses. That's what they do. And we've gone through enough elections to have that same statement again. So my opinion is you can ask them another survey question about that, you're going to get the same result. And if they don't want to say it because they're tired of answering the question, then they'll do what happens in political surveys. They'll just not necessarily answer or not be truthful, and then they'll let their ultimate expression take place in ballot boxes. I just want to make sure that we're, from a business development standpoint, we are tailoring the future businesses in McLendon-Chisholm are going to be reflective of what the desires of the population.
Yeah, that's what the survey is going to come into.
I understand, and I appreciate it. I want public input.
to highlight on this conversation, so to retain the open feel, and this is my personal opinion, this is the opinion of the council, obviously, but to retain that open feel of our town, and as far as our town's heritage, our town's culture, and our aesthetic values of having that open space. If we did alter the zoning, where all our commercial development zoning wasn't run down to 05, then that would free up that aesthetic of the open space look. If you guys decided on a city center location that was slightly off the beaten path, so that way it's not immediately seen as you drive home to town, into town. That would give the economic development and the ability to continue, but also preserve the open spaces. And also at the same time, when you drive home, you wouldn't actually see it as a first immediate. As an example of that, if you pretty much look across the street, there's 100 acres. It's not farmed. There's no beef on it, and it's just completely dormant. So something on the lines of being across from City Hall, I'm just using that as a brief example because it's large enough in scale to accommodate it, but at the same time, it's off the beaten path far enough where it's not going to be the immediate thing that you see. At the same time, when it comes to P&Z and the zoning, when we create that new zoning district, you'll have the opportunity in the zoning itself to create a zoning which allows or disallows certain businesses to accommodate that space. So for example, if you don't want cell phone repair shops or dollar stores or stuff like that, that could be put into the zoning of that district. So that way you could accommodate businesses that meet the size, scale, but also the feel of our community.
Regarding using that area over there, you're gonna create a lot of traffic.
It was an example of a piece of property that's off the beaten path.
Right, okay. Off the beaten path though, you're also funneling more traffic to get to those places, and we have a lot of residential streets here. I
Well,
mean, 205 is good because, in my opinion, because it is a larger street, and it's going to get larger, and you get a lot more exposure, plus it's made for that kind of traffic.
And that's the question. That's the question of exposure. Do you want to see it every single time you drive home?
Well, if it's in one spot, but I don't want to drive like down 80 and see metal buildings and shops and everything on every other side. But a nice looking scale to fit small center,
So you could,
to me is not disagreeable.
well, like I said, as you guys create this new district, you could create a specific zoning for this type of district, and then within that zoning parameters, you could put in the characteristics of the certain types of businesses that it can accommodate.
Yes.
Is there any properties that are going to be impacted that we think should become available to do something like that?
Yes, I can take a look at the revised text dot alignment and identify properties that, in my estimation, might be appropriate, that might be affected. And I'll do that. I'm not going to do it tomorrow, though.
No, we're not asking for that. Just something that you could identify some areas that because we need something to work with.
I'll do that.
I think maybe we need to talk about when we're going to meet next, and do we want to meet as the two groups, or do we want to meet individually, and how we want to move forward.
I think we got a lot of comments on that.
It was a good dialogue.
I agree both groups would be fine, more of mine is going on there.
You want to meet together?
Do you think we have anything on our agenda for December?
What do we have on P&Z next time?
Do you want anything in December?
Yeah, I think we just want to keep track of what we get from, especially, we'd really like to get this survey
But in December?
launched to go
In
off.
December, do we
Try
have?
to get that back and find out sometime getting back to do the percent.
Do you want to meet in December, or?
That's what we do, yeah, but I kind of don't want to meet twice, so do you think that we're going to have need to have a planning and zoning meeting too? Or,
We don't have anything pending for planning and zoning in December, right?
Okay, that's fine. I'm just thinking with the holidays, I don't want to propose, so. So, yeah.
So Tuesday, the Tuesday or Thursday,
Thursdays are better for you, aren't they?
I didn't hear you, sorry.
Aren't Thursdays usually better for you?
Thursday evenings are good for me.
So we go on third Thursday. The third Thursday of December is December 17th.
Council is now meeting on the second and fourth Wednesdays, just so you know.
Is it better if we move it up a week? That would be 2 nights in a row for you guys, but getting further over in Christmas, better for everybody else. Can you guys do
It's fine for me.
December 10th, is that a date for everybody? You do that, Mr. Tucker?
It's 10.
I can do it.
It sounds like December 10th.
6:30 again, Leslie?
Yeah.
And what do we want on that agenda and
unless they, basically, put that on potential survey, on that, and then discussion, hopefully make it posted by that time, if we can provide some information on places within the city where we could have a good location, so we can do a hundred acre lot, and kind of, and then everybody else to take a look and kind of provide their own input. I think that's kind of the focus. We really want to start the process of how we're going to get information out to the public, and then set up how we're going to start, taking it down. So I think we need to identify the probably 3 parts of the comprehensive plan, starting with the future land use and something else. And then for us on the economic side, we need to look at how we're going to come up with our idea of how we're going to address the comprehensive, the economic development of the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, I mean, I can foresee requiring some GIS experience to put together a survey results. Not a whole lot, but something like this.
Well, typically, someone in there would go, like, this is what we did before, they're gonna go online, and so, I mean, if we separate the mail it to, and then,
Yeah, you can go ahead and, GIS is just super simple.
Yeah.
Filter in, okay, these will look this way, we'll have to understand what it is.
one of the things that we were tasked ourselves with was taking the comprehensive plan and the economic development and each going through it and doing our own markups, suggested markups, if you like, so if you all want to do that as well, and then we can compare notes and sort of start, because I know that you all want to get going on the comprehensive plan, right, so. Yeah, so if we can start doing some suggested markups, and comparing notes and sort of fleshing it out. I don't know if we can do that next time, or.
Everybody submits them, and we'll look at how we can consolidate those. We could just come up with one time instead of multiple.
Yeah, it makes sense.
so are you gonna just take a chunk of it at a time? It seems like a lot to take
I
the
think
whole
all of it.
plan.
Well, I think we're going to break it down into the future land use, that part of it. Let's break it down into 3 chunks, and then whatever the inputs are, on that one chunk.
Should we put together a joint subdivision also? That would be a survey process based upon something else. We put that on the agenda to determine if we would be, format subdivision and the city come up with that together. Put that survey together and drop it on that. So, implementation, because we're sending a straight from subdivision to ours,
rest of it. We'll talk tomorrow. I don't, but Shelley may.
You got a lot done.
Okay, I'll ask her.
I think the survey